The New York Times is pretty much our newspaper of record, so it's a very important resource, and we actually have two different databases that give you access to this paper. To access them from the library's homepage at library.clackamas.edu, look under the Find Articles section and choose Newspapers. This one, the New York Times historical newspaper from the company ProQuest, gives cover-to-cover digital copies of every page in PDF format all the way back to the first issue of the paper in 1851. But it has a rolling blackout of the last 3 years. For coverage of recent events, you can use the LexisNexis database, but that's another demo. In this one, we'll choose the historical database. Generally, for college work, I'd recommend using this advanced search screen, which gives you lots of flexibility and control. Notice that right off the bat, you could set some limits here. You could choose a date range, and you could select a type of article that you're interested in. This can be very useful. For example, the New York Times is a great resource for book and film reviews, and if that's what you're after, you can uncheck all the other types and then ask just for reviews. But unless you specifically want a review or an obituary or something like that, I'd recommend not restricting your results until after you've done some work with your search terms. You'll be able to choose dates and types again later. Okay, let's take a look at what this search engine does with your keywords. First, as you type, it uses autocomplete to suggest terms to you. Now, you might want to check these for spelling and for suggestions, but these are just searches that other people have done. This database doesn't have actual assigned subject headings like you might have seen in some other indexes. This search engine works a lot like Google. If you give it some words, it retrieves articles that have all of your words somewhere in the document. Searching child soldiers, for example, finds over 80,000 articles, but that's because it finds articles that might mention soldiers in one part of the text and child somewhere else, not necessarily together. It's as if you had typed in an "and" into that search. It's interpreting it as an "and." You can see that it does bring articles with the exact term child soldiers to the top of the list, but it can be helpful to get rid of all those false hits in the first place, and this search engine gives us a couple of good ways to do that. Now you can see that the database has automatically, for some reason, switched me back to the basic search instead of the advanced search. So I want to go back to the advanced search, or I can just click Modify Search to get back to my search screen. And one good way to get a better search is to use this pull-down menu to tell ProQuest where to look for your terms in the article. This is called a field search because we're telling it which data fields to search for our terms in. Cabs is a good choice. This tells the search engine to look for our terms in the citation or in the abstract. An abstract is usually a summary of an article, but this database uses the first paragraph as the abstract. So what we're really searching now is the headline, the author, and the lead paragraph for our terms. That takes us down to about 800 results, and they're more likely to all be relevant. Another way to get rid of false hits is to use quotation marks around an exact phrase. So we're now looking for things that have only that exact phrase, child soldiers, not child and soldiers. I'm going to switch this back to the all text search because I want to get lots of results for this demo. And now we have 224 articles that have the exact phrase child soldiers somewhere in the text. While we're here, take a look at this nice visual graph of the dates of the articles by decade. We can see that this issue pretty much came on the scene in the 1980s. It got more attention in the 1990s, but has been written about much more in the last decade. If you want, you can click on these to limit to the articles from that particular decade. You could also use the slider to select the dates that you're interested in. This is also a good place and a good time to limit by document type. For example, in this case, we might want to ignore the reviews and limit our results to just the 141 major articles. Or sometimes the front page article might be the most in-depth ones and the ones that you're really interested in. Once you've selected one of these choices, if you want to get back to see all of your results, you can just clear your selection by clicking that little X there. Now, a straightforward search like that might do the job for you, but you may want to narrow your search down some more and focus on some particular aspect. So we'll go back to the advanced screen, and we can use the ands here to include more terms. For example, I might be interested in rehabilitation of child soldiers. Now that only leaves me 8 articles. But if I'm interested in rehabilitation, maybe I'd be interested in counseling of child soldiers. So I can use an or on that same line to include that idea. As long as the article is about child soldiers, then I would like it if it talks about either rehabilitation or counseling. So remember to kind of keep different ideas on different lines, and things that are kind of the same idea, string those together with ors on your next line. So I'm looking for articles that talk about child soldiers, that exact phrase, and also mention either rehabilitation or counseling. That takes me up to 13. Now, another handy trick that you'll see in many databases is if I'm interested in something to do with rehabilitation, then I might be interested in rehabilitating. So I could include rehabilitating up here, but even better, I can put an asterisk at the end of that word, and that will substitute for any ending. So we chop the word off at rehabilitate, and then put an asterisk there, and we will now get rehabilitated, rehabilitating, rehabilitate, rehabilitation, any form of that word. And you can see that that picks up a few more items. Now, just so you know, this search engine uses the asterisk as a wildcard character in the middle of a word, as well as the truncation character in the end of a word. So I could do this search to look for either the word woman or the word women, either A or E here, and a word beginning homeless, homeless, homelessness. And that gets over 22,000 results. Again, the timeline can be very interesting. Notice the spike in articles that talk about women and homelessness. We have a spike here during the Depression era, and then again in recent times. Those are our search tips for this New York Times historical database. Remember to experiment with your search terms before you use your date and your article type limits. Use quotation marks when you're looking for an exact phrase. If you're getting a lot of false hits, try searching in the citation and abstracts. And in many cases, using an asterisk to stand for various endings of a word may be helpful. See our next video for tips on working with your results in this database.